Today on NA Mike, we're going to go over everything I've found wrong with my FC RX-7 so far. I went to Target and got this whiteboard to keep track of everything, just kind of jotting down notes as I find things wrong with the car or things I'm thinking about, and to just keep everything straight in my head. And today we're going to go over some of the things that I've fixed over the past 2 weeks, I believe, and what some of the stuff on this board is. Alright, starting here at the top, the speedometer did not work whenever I got the car. The actual cable was actually broken underneath the car where it goes in the transmission. The guy that I bought the car gave me an extra speedometer cable, and I was able to swap that out. And I also took a bath in transmission fluid, so I did a transmission fluid change as well while I was under the car. The speedometer is now off because of the 433 gears in the back of the car. This car apparently has a set of 433 gears versus the 410s that are stock. And so it's reading high, but at least I am getting something on the speedometer that is somewhat in the neighborhood of how fast you're going. Clutch fluid. So I had the intercooler piping off, and I went ahead and bled all the nasty clutch fluid out of the car. Front mount intercooler fixed / installed ready. Front mount, the car has a Godspeed or GoSpeed front mount intercooler kit on it, and it was not installed properly. It looks like they didn't hack the bumper up enough to make it sit where it's supposed to sit. And so that's going to need to be addressed. It's kind of pushing the front of the bumper out a little bit, and it just doesn't look right. So that's going to be addressed later going on another project. The AEM meth injection kit is sitting in the hatch of the car, and looks like there's no spare tire in the car. They could have, mounted it into the spare tire well with the pump and the reservoir bottle. So I may go ahead and change that out and move it one day, but for now it's fine. It does work. And on the subject of the AEM meth kit, I found that the meth injection line was running actually through the cabin of the car to the engine bay to the meth injector. Obviously that's not a good idea, because that has potential to be hazardous if you're running actual methanol versus just water, and you don't want to have anything that's going to catch fire while you're actually in the cabin of the car. So I ordered another line from Amazon and have replaced that and routed it properly underneath the car, zip tied to where the factory fuel lines are. Another item is the brakes, and change out the old dirty fluid. I did buy a brand new set of Hawk HP Plus pads and new hardware and new stainless steel lines for the other blue car. I'm going to probably just pull all that stuff off and put it onto this car because it's all brand new. It has 0 miles on it. The next item is the seat belt. That actually didn't turn out to be an item. I thought the latch for the seat belt was missing, but on the driver's side, the lap belt latch, but it is actually there. It was stuffed behind the race seat, which brings down the next item, which is seats. I need to either get a set of factory seats recovered, or do something about a harness bar, something to keep the race seat. The race seat's not super comfortable, obviously, for long distance driving. It is a lot of fun otherwise, but I am going to need to address the seats, both of them. With the passenger side is fine, it's just cracked from being old. It's all intact, but I don't have a stock driver's side seat except for out of the other car, which I may take the other one out, get it recovered, and then get the passenger one recovered as well. So that's kind of the plan for that. Standalone, I bought a MegaSport MS3 Pro for the other car, and it's sitting in my kitchen. This car currently has an Adaptronic standalone system, but I bought the MegaSport. I kind of want to use it. It's a flying lead, make your own harness type deal. This is a plug-and-play system on the car now, but the factory harnesses are starting to get really old, and you can run into some problems down the road. Plus the MegaSport does have a lot of features that the Adaptronic does not have, so I'm kind of planning to go ahead and do that here in the near future. One of the things I did notice once I got my laptop hooked up to the Adaptronic was that I was getting no reading on the intake air temperature sensor. Turns out the sensor was actually just bad. I went to a local junkyard and was able to score a sensor I pulled off of a junkyard motor that was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and hooked it up, and my intake sensor works fine. Before I went to the junkyard, I ended up checking resistance on the sensor, and I ended up also going ahead and checking the continuity back to the ECU, and it was both good. So I was like, well, it just must be a bad sensor, and it was bad. Detail and polish the paint. That will happen probably pretty soon, knowing that I can't just leave, well enough to be alone, and I'm a detail guy, so that'll probably happen pretty soon. Trying to get most of the work done on the car, so I'm not leaning over the freshly polished paint, but the paint's actually in pretty good condition. It should polish up pretty nice, so stay tuned for that. One situation I want to address is there is a conglomeration of vacuum tees. There's like one nipple off the intake manifold that runs to the blow-off valve, that runs into the car to the map, or the map sensor that's built onto the ECU, that runs to the AEM meth kit, and it's just all teed together. And you really should only have the map sensor on its own dedicated line by itself, just for any chance of any fluctuations you don't want to have. And so I need to address that. I need to order some vacuum hose in bulk and address that. The battery is currently not tied down in the car whatsoever, so I need to come up with some kind of bracket to hold the battery down, because obviously if you're turning or stopping or whatever, you don't want your battery tilting around and possibly arcing out somewhere. Any racing sanction, that's gonna be the first thing they're gonna check is your battery tied down for that reason. So that needs to be addressed. If I keep the race seat, I need to get a steering wheel quick release to make getting out of the car much easier. It's just a total pain. So I'll be looking into that if I decide to go ahead and keep the race seat in the car long term. Insurance and tag, yep, I did finish that up, and I'm currently legit and with both that. Some of the exhaust hangers and donuts are missing on the back of the car where the exhaust is hanging. There's some stuff, the exhaust I want to do, possibly swap in a high flow cat, because it's quite stinky and I'm not really about that stinky rotary life. So I'm thinking about getting a welding cat maybe and weld it somewhere into the Racing Beat exhaust maybe, or swap the Apex GT spec car exhaust off the other car and have the rest of the exhaust fabbed up or something. I just kind of thought of that today, so that's on my mind. One thing I want to check is the base fuel pressure. The car actually has a sensor in the running into the ECU off of an aftermarket fuel pressure regulator and aftermarket sensor, but it doesn't look like it's rising rate, even though there's a vacuum line hooked up to it. So I need to check that and make sure that that is actually rising like it should be. The car had a bad exhaust leak whenever I got it. That just ended up being a bolt was missing on one of the flanges on the exhaust underneath the car, and I put a bolt in there, put the gasket back where it is, and it seems to be fine now. The pin on that on the door that actually tells whether the door is open or closed, that pin was bad on the driver's side. The interior lights would never come on, and so I actually stole that off the other car. It was actually just, the one on my current car was just rusted and frozen. The one on the other car was fine. I swapped that in today, and all my interior lights came back on. Everything's happy. Whenever I was under the car last weekend, I did do an oil change, just because I have no clue how many miles are on the oil, and I was already underneath the car draining the transmission fluid, so it was pretty easy. One thing the car is missing is the under tray, or belly pan is what they're called, and the other car does have one, so I'll probably just end up swapping it. I have been driving the car around a good bit. It has been holding 180 degrees around town, but I haven't done any sustained highway driving or any amount of hard driving, and went super hot out. It's only in the 70s or whatever now, so that definitely needs to be added back on there to make sure you can direct all the airflow into the radiator and intercooler. One of the things I fixed before going to Cars and Coffee was the electric fan that's on the car. They had it wired to where it would just come on when the key turned on, which of course makes the car a lot longer to heat up, and it's just really annoying. So there was actually already a wire ran from the ECU to where the relay was set up and where the E-fan was wired into. So I ended up setting up finishing setting up the control on the ECU. That way it would kick on. I think I've got it kicking on at like 190 and then it'll cool down and turn off basically. So it's all ECU controlled now. I don't have to think about it. You don't want to ever wire that to a human switch, because humans forget to turn those off and on. You always want to have the ECU doing, or a thermostat of some sort, doing the control for you. One thing I noticed whenever I went to Cars and Coffee yesterday was the turn signals did not work whatsoever. I actually got a good hint from my buddy Dale on what that was, and I had forgot about this, even though I am aware because I've had an FC before, is the CPU unit that's under the driver's footwell. I actually just swapped that from the other car and also replaced the turn fuse under the dash. It was blown, and I was able to replace one of the bulbs on the front, and I was able to get all the turn signals working. The hazard lights are working properly, so that's good. I've got a weird issue where the stock tack is jumping around a little bit. It'll be sustained and good, and then it'll kind of bounce around and then come back to where it's really supposed to be reading. On the ECU, the signal's good coming off of the cast, but the trailing coil actually drives the tachometer in the car, not the signal it gets from the cast. So what I'm thinking is, one thing I just thought of today is I need to go ahead and just change the plugs in the car and see if I'm, because I'm getting a little bit of a misfire, which is down here on one of these ignition breakup, which is the next one, ignition breakup in the high RPM. So I need to go ahead and just change the plugs and see if that will fix both those issues. I did try swapping the trailing coil today off of the other car, and that did not have any effect on it. It's still doing the same thing, so it's not the trailing coil. The other thing missing on the car, there was no wideband or boost gauge. Obviously that's a big no-no for a turbo car and a turbo rotary at that. So I did order an AEM wideband this past week. I installed it on Friday. I just have it temporarily set up on a gauge pod in the glove box of the car, but I'm going to eventually move that to another spot on the car that's more visible and easier to read, and as well as get a dedicated boost gauge. One of the things with the MegaSport that it does have is a CAN output to a CAN driven gauge. Now I think this other Adaptronic also has a CAN output to drive gauges as well. I'm not sure if it's universal or what have you, but there's a couple of people that make aftermarket CAN gauges that can read all the inputs that the ECU is getting and feed them via the CAN bus to the gauge for you to display. So you can kind of simplify not having to need 10 gauges. You can toggle through all the inputs or select the ones you want to be looking at, whether you want to be looking at water temp or air fuel ratio or what have you. So that's something I'm looking into as well. And then, like I said, down below there was the meth line that was running through the car. I did already address that with the new line and got that all tied up underneath the car. Anyways, this weekend I have driven the car quite a bit. Yesterday the car's in coffee, and today I've been driving it around a good bit. I've probably put, I don't know, with the speedometer being off, I think it says I've put maybe 50 miles on the car in the past 2 days. I've definitely burned about a half a tank of gas, so the tuning is not super good on the car. It's enough to drive around and have some fun. I actually got the car's running on the wastegate boost pressure about 11 or 12 pounds, and one thing I didn't actually put on my list here that maybe remind me is the timing map for the car. In boost, the car had a timing map that's set up for 30, 33, 32 degrees of timing in boost, which obviously that's a big no-no. It's like someone never even went into the boost range of the timing map, where they just copied everything from the vacuum and pasted it into the boost range. So I did go in there and do a rough, quick timing map to get the car back to where it should be. And I did add like 10% fuel in all the boost ranges just to make sure the fuel was safe under boost. And I have been boosting it around on 12 pounds of boost, and it's feeling pretty good. Obviously there's much more tuning, and like I said, since I'm going to kind of have to start from scratch from tuning, I may just go ahead and switch to the MegaSport and get that going in the car, because I'm going to have to start over. And there's a lot of features on the MegaSport, like the auto tuning that you can do for the fuel side to make your life a lot easier. So other than that, that's the update on the car, and hope you keep watching. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and have a good week. Bye.